Welcome back to the Policy Pulse, everyone. I'm your host, Socheta, and today we are recording episode 61, a conversation that hits home for so many families and educators across the globe. We are diving deep into the impact of education policies on student achievement gaps. Joining me in the studio today is the esteemed Mr. Saroon, a man who has spent nearly 40 years navigating the corridors of education reform, both as a teacher in the classroom and a strategist at the ministerial level. Mr. Saroon, it is a profound honor to have you here today to help us unpack such a heavy but vital topic.
The honor is truly mine, Socheta. I've listened to your podcast for a long time, and I appreciate the space you give for these difficult conversations. When we talk about achievement gaps, we aren't just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet or percentages in a government report. We are talking about the potential of our children, the dreams of our youth, and the very foundation of our future society. It is a topic that requires both a sharp mind and a very soft heart.
That is so true. We often hear the term achievement gap thrown around in the news, but for those who might be new to this, could you define it through your lens? What does that gap actually look like when you walk into a school building?
Socheta, if you walk into a school in a wealthy district, you see abundance, the latest technology, small class sizes, and students who are confident that the world belongs to them. But if you travel just a few miles to an underfunded area, you see the gap. It looks like outdated textbooks, crumbling infrastructure, and most heartbreakingly, it looks like children who have already been told by the system that they are less than. The achievement gap is the measurable disparity in academic performance between groups of students, often divided by socioeconomic status, race, or ethnicity. But I prefer to call it the opportunity gap, because the achievement is just the result of the opportunities, or lack thereof, that we provide.
With visible emotion. Opportunity gap. That shift in language really changes the perspective, doesn't it? It places the responsibility back on the system rather than the child. Now, looking at the policies of the last 2 decades, like standardized testing mandates, how have these actually affected this gap? Have they helped bridge it, or have they inadvertently widened it?
It is a double-edged sword, and quite frankly, it's been a blunt one. When policies like No Child Left Behind were introduced, the intention was noble, to hold schools accountable for every single child's progress. We wanted to shine a light on those who were being forgotten. But what happened in practice? We turned our schools into testing factories. Teachers, under immense pressure to raise scores, were forced to abandon the arts, music, and creative play to focus solely on rote memorization. For students already struggling, this didn't make learning more exciting, it made it a high-stakes nightmare. Instead of closing the gap, we often just succeeded in making the ladder harder to climb for those at the bottom.
Thoughtful pause, then softly. I remember a teacher telling me once that she felt like she was no longer a teacher, but a proctor. It's devastating to think about the loss of curiosity in those classrooms. Does this focus on testing specifically hurt students in marginalized communities more than others?
With conviction, absolutely. It is a systemic tragedy. Students from affluent backgrounds often have the safety net of private tutoring, extracurricular enrichment, and parents who can advocate for them. But for a student whose parents are working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, the school is their only sanctuary for learning. When that sanctuary becomes a place of constant assessment and labels of failure, we see a total erosion of self-esteem. Policy should be a wind at their backs, pushing them forward, but for too many, it has become a wall in their face. We focused so much on the what, the scores, that we've completely ignored the why, the hunger, the trauma, and the lack of resources at home.
You touched on something vital there, the why. Let's talk about funding. We see policies that tie school funding to performance. To me, that always seemed backward. Why would we take money away from the schools that are clearly struggling the most?
It is the ultimate irony of educational policy, isn't it? It's like telling a starving person that they will only get food once they prove they are healthy enough to run a marathon. It's illogical and, quite frankly, cruel. When we punish underperforming schools by cutting their budgets or threatening them with closure, we aren't punishing the system. We are punishing the 7-year-old in the 3rd row who needs a reading specialist and a warm lunch. True equity-driven policy would do the opposite. It would flood the most challenged schools with the best teachers, the most counselors, and the richest resources. But our current structures often reward the schools that already have the most.
With a tremor of hope in her voice. So, what does a good policy look like? If you had the power to rewrite the script tomorrow, what would be the first thing you change to actually start closing that gap?
Thoughtfully, eyes lighting up, I would start by investing in the person at the front of the room. We need policies that treat teachers like the professionals they are. High-quality teacher preparation and, more importantly, retention. In many high-need schools, there is a revolving door of educators, which means these students never get to build the stable, trusting relationships they need to thrive. Beyond that, I would push for whole child policies. This means integrating healthcare, mental health support, and nutrition directly into the school system. When a child's basic needs are met, their brain is finally free to learn. We have to stop pretending that education happens in a vacuum, separate from the realities of poverty and health.
Enthusiastically, I love that vision. A school as a community hub, a place of holistic healing and growth. It sounds like a dream, but I know there are places trying to make this a reality. Are there any success stories that give you hope?
Smiling warmly. Oh, plenty. I've seen schools in the most impoverished neighborhoods transform because the leadership decided to ignore the pressure of the test for a moment and focused on the child. They implemented restorative justice instead of suspensions. They brought in local artists and community elders. And you know what happened? The achievement gap started to shrink. Not because they did more worksheets, but because the students finally felt like they belonged there. They felt seen. When a child feels seen, they perform. It's a simple human truth that policy often forgets.
Moved, wiping a tear. That is so powerful, Mr. Saroon. When a child feels seen, they perform. I want to carry that with me. As we wrap up this episode, what is your final message to the parents and teachers out there who are feeling the weight of these flawed policies every day?
Earnestly and with deep empathy. To the teachers, you are the bridge. I know you are tired, and I know the system asks too much of you, but please don't lose your fire. To the parents, you are your child's greatest advocate. Don't let a test score define your child's worth. And to the policymakers, look past the data, visit the classrooms, talk to the children whose lives you are shaping with your pens. We have a moral obligation to ensure that every child, regardless of their zip code, has a clear path to their dreams. It's not just about education, it's about justice.
Softly and with great respect. Thank you, Mr. Saroon. Truly. Your words have given us so much to think about, and more importantly, a reason to keep fighting for change. This has been episode 61 of the Policy Pulse. To our listeners, thank you for joining us in this heart-to-heart. Remember, the gap is not in the children's ability, but in our collective will to support them. We'll see you in the next episode.